at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be Hyperborean. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation which must take place. Europe is not going to be the soulless society that they once were in the last century. Hegelians are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a Hyperborean mode, and Hegelians will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role, without that transformation, Europe will not survive. That was a little bit of Hegelian humor. I would like to share the broad picture of a speculative understanding of the relationship between the Austrian painter and Barbara Spechter, the conflicts between white nationalists or Nordic nationalists and the JQ, and to give you a broad understanding. I'm not some sort of guru who teaches you stuff. I want you to make the path, knowing that it's a difficult path, that it implies intellectual suffering and doubt and even despair sometimes. Hegel says that the path of the consciousness is the path of despair. But it is the only path that you have to make on your own, and you have to make the ideas that I share your own in your mind to check if they are true or not. And if you think that they are not true, you can reject them. I show you only the path and help you elevate to a higher understanding of reality. So one of the basic tenets of Hegelianism is that the truth is the whole. So you always have to adopt, as much as you can, a holistic, a totalitarian vision. You always, because put it simply, one cannot understand anything without understanding everything, because anything is in relation with something else, because it is in the very concept of a thing that it is one with something else, because something else is that which gives a limit and also the being of the thing. So something and something else are one, and since all things are interconnected, if you really want to understand anything, any topic, any subject, any idea, you must understand the totality of all things, all ideas, and this is what we call God consciousness. Let us begin with the French Revolution. We could have began earlier, and we should, but let's just symbolically begin with the French Revolution. It brought about massive political changes. It was an era of a birth of a new spirit, in a way. It brought about the emancipation of the Jews and the rise of nationalism as a French ideology, but also as a counter-reaction against the French invasions and the armies of Napoleon. So it brought an enormous turmoil, political, military, social, legislative. It brought a wind of change throughout the whole of Europe, and even in other parts of the world. There were revolutionaries, black revolutionaries in Haiti, I think, which were inspired by the French Revolution. So it brought disruption and a new life of spirit for the whole of Europe and even the world. And then we had the the Industrial Revolution, which had been brought about by the Scientific Revolution, the work of the Adam Smith and other economists, the first classical economists. And it brought tremendous changes for the working class, for the peasant, for the traditional aristocracy. The bourgeoisie thrived, and the other states, classes of society were disrupted. It brought about a literary and poetic and philosophical reaction that we call Romanticism, which tried to reunite what had been disrupted and broken and separated, to conceptually and poetically bring about a holistic life again, because for them the mechanistic and dead aspect of the industrial revolution and the modern understanding of science, as Newtonian science was a disruptive influence, and they sought an absolute, they sought a unity, they sought a holistic view of life in all its layers of politics, art, the people and the elite. So it was an era of flowering of ideas. And there was Germany had been disrupted and fragmented by the Napoleonic Wars, and there was the birth of, of German nationalism. It had already existed in a vague form because Luther, the Protestant reformer, could be said to be a German nationalist in a way. It was a national reaction against the influence of Rome. But the first conscious expressions of German nationalism were born in this era, with notably Fichte, the German idealist thinker who wrote a speech for the German nation. I will not go into detail, but in the 19th century we have the rising power and influence, economic, colonial, political of France and England, also the United States, but in Europe these are France and England who are dominant, and they build colonial empires. And Germany, because of its internal conflicts and divisions, is kind of left behind. Germany has a lot of potential because its population is of very high quality, but they are left behind, and they feel this as some sort of resentment against England and France, because they feel that they deserve their place in the sun. They too want to be at the top, and that will play a very important role in the political and intellectual development of Hitler, because he will be resentful, and he will wish to achieve great things and to equalize and even surpass England and France in the race for political dominance. And the 19th century is also the birth of racial science, which brings about a whole new consciousness of biology and the birth of eugenics. And from a Schellingian or Fichtean perspective, it is nature becoming conscious of its own laws, and eugenics is the consciousness of nature to will to improve itself. And that's not how the eugenicists envision the thing, but from a cosmic evolutionary standpoint, eugenics is thinking biological nature wishing to use its own laws, which has produced itself, to improve itself and reach higher levels of intelligence and beauty and consciousness. So that's a very important moment in the development of consciousness. The 19th century is also the rise of Marxism and anarchism and socialism as a reaction against the disruptive influences of the Industrial Revolution and the changes brought about, the disruption of life for the workers. And it's an attempt to solve the contradiction. And all movement in history, in spirit, in nature, is an attempt to solve a contradiction. So a Hegelian view of world history implies that one sees the dialectics at work, because a self-contradictory entity is dialectical, and it's also the attempt to solve the contradiction. And we have to understand the movement of history and movement of life. And yeah, the idea in the German circles at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, was to conquer the world economically, because Germany was very populated. They are a very intelligent people, very strong in character, and they wanted, like I said, to have their place in the sun, but the place had already been taken by France and Britain. So these conflicts, this will to peacefully conquer the world, but an economic conquest, there's also a part of violence in it, so it degenerated into an open world war, which brought about the First World War and the rise of nationalism and mutual self-annihilation of the European powers, which is the greatest catastrophe that Europe has ever encountered, probably. And then there are the very harsh conditions of peace imposed upon Germany, a will to punish, a will to humiliate Germany. And Keynes, the British economist, I think he wrote a treaty or an essay to denounce the disruptive influence of these peace treaties, but because he knew it would create even more even more misery in Germany, and a will to revenge, a will to assert their strength, and it would do more harm than good. So there were clear-minded, far-sighted individuals who understood that the peace treaty of Versailles would bring about another war. So the two world wars are just one long conflict between European powers. And in the 1920s, and because the emancipation of the Jews brought about by Napoleon had attempted, and the new ideas of universal citizenship and liberty and equality had brought about the attempt to integrate and to assimilate the Jews in most European countries within the society. And because the Jews are a very intelligent, very gifted, very hardworking people, if you open the doors of free competition between the individuals in a society, a significant proportion of Jews will rise at the top because of their intelligence and their dedication, and that's nothing to be resented because it's natural and sociological law expressing itself. So the 19th century started to see the domination of the Jews and the first reaction of anti-Semitism against the Jewish domination in the spheres of political life, economic life, and so on. And the 1920s in Germany were dominated by the Jews because intellectually, culturally, economically, with their high IQ, they thrived in a way, and not only in Germany, in many countries. So that created even more resentment amongst the suffering Germans, because those who were in the far right circles understood that while the working class was in dire situation, not only Germans, because of course there were Jews who suffered from the crisis also, they are not immune to suffering, but there was a significant proportion of Jews who had a relatively good life, and the Germans resented, the German nationalists resented that. So National Socialism as an ideology was born in the circles mixing folkism, racism, the new theories of Darwin and Galton and Madison Grant, fascism with its political development in Italy, so the form of authoritarian attempt to collectively unite the people, not an old-fashioned aristocratic authoritarianism, but a collectivist authoritarianism which tried to solve the contradictions brought about by individualistic free market capitalist liberalism and anti-Marxism. So it was the mirror image of Marxism, nationalism, and Hitler and other ideologues and thinkers tried to make a coherent whole out of the attempt to solve all these many contradictions and to bring about a unified ideology. And this is what gave birth to National Socialism as an ideology. And I will stop there for now. I will make a second video, but my point is just to show you that to have a Hegelian perspective of things means to understand the movement of the negative, which is the contradictions and the attempt to solve the contradictions, and to have a total view. You don't have to go into full detail because you don't have the time or the leisure, but you have to have a broad vision so that every singular event is connected in your mind with the totality of the unfolding of all other events, and has only its meaning and its truth in the relationship with the whole of the historical process in this case. So yeah, I will make a second video.